In this forecast, another huge pattern change is coming to the United States that'll bring a cold blast and severe storms. And several areas may drop below 30 degrees this week. All of that and more is coming right up. As we head further into fall, the weather is getting more and more wild across the United States. This week, we're talking about a cold blast along with several days in a row of severe weather and a tropical development in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm going to give you the latest details on all of that information in this forecast. Let's first begin though with the temperatures over the next several days, as we will have a cold front approaching the United States. This will bring a few rounds of severe weather. First one's today and the second one will be tomorrow, and that will include areas from the central and even potentially the southern plains back through the Ohio Valley, could even stretch into the southeastern portions of the United States as well. But more importantly, the cold air that we're going to see with this trough back up in Canada is going to really usher in going to Friday. Low temperatures will drop into the 20s and 30s for a lot of areas back up in the Midwest, along with only high temperatures being in the low to mid 40s for some areas going into Saturday. Eventually heading into the weekend and early next week, we'll see a secondary cold blast out of Canada. This one will be even stronger, potentially bring lows into the teens, and we also could see high temperatures barely get out of the 30s and a lot of those areas in the Midwest. This could also dive down as far south as North Texas and also could go as far east as areas into New England going into potentially later next week. So a big pattern change is coming, and the Climate Prediction Center has that very well clearly indicated that we're going to see well below average temperatures across areas in the eastern United States, specifically and more importantly areas back in the Ohio Valley. That's where we're likely going to see the coldest temperatures, but areas like Florida, not out of the question that we'll see below average temperatures going into next week. So if you're in those areas, you might see a little early fall. Back out in the western United States, well above average temperatures are going to happen back out in California through Washington. So if you're over that direction, not looking at any cold air coming your way anytime soon. Over the next week, we're going to see two separate cold blasts. Beginning first with this week on Wednesday into Thursday, our first cold frontal boundary will come through areas in the United States. We'll see showers and storms that also could be severe. More on that here in just a second. From the Midwest back down through the southern plains. Eventually going to Thursday into Friday, a lot more showers and storms stretching all across the East Coast, even into Florida. And then back out here to the north, this is where our trough is. And something kind of interesting to note here is that we could even see maybe some snow flurries or even some sleet behind this, even in areas in Minnesota. So obviously this doesn't seem like it'll accumulate at this point, but it will be something to watch for long term. Eventually going to the weekend, we'll probably still have that lingering trough back up to the north, but going into early next week, that's when we'll begin to see more colder air ushering in behind this trough that will eventually re-strengthen back up in Canada. That will allow for some showers and storms along that cold frontal boundary from Texas back through New England. So this cold frontal boundary will likely be extended a bit more to the northeast to west instead of what we're looking at before that's a bit more to the north to south. So it'll be a bit of a difference there, and that could also usher cooler air down as far south as areas in Texas. So big changes coming going into next week. Now for today, we do have a marginal risk for severe weather. I don't expect this to get upgraded, but it does include areas from Wisconsin back through Kansas. Main concern will be damaging winds and isolated large hail. Doesn't seem to be that widespread of a threat by any means. It'll depend on if any storms develop. But more importantly, going to the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow, we'll begin to see a cluster of storms develop back through the Midwest into Missouri. This will be the area that we'll have to watch for maybe some isolated damaging winds and hail. Eventually going into tomorrow, it becomes a bit more of a line of storms, and by early tomorrow afternoon, we could see maybe a couple of these storms produce damaging winds, large hail, and potentially an isolated tornado threat across areas in the Ohio Valley back through the south. And that would include areas in Arkansas, for example, where strong to very severe storms could end up forming down that direction due to higher instability. So what does that mean for the severe weather potential across these areas? It is currently a marginal threat. I would not be surprised if this does get upgraded to an extent to a slight risk of severe weather. And again, it seems like our best chance for any severe weather that's more significant would probably be back down in Arkansas. So if you're in those areas, just keep that in mind. Maybe a little bit of higher hailstone sizes, maybe a higher damaging wind count, and also maybe an isolated tornado threat existing down that direction. Tornado potential for now is currently including areas from Ohio and Indiana, goes all the way back through areas into Texas, and it's primarily into eastern Texas, but it's going to be something to keep in mind for maybe a brief spin up or two with a couple of those storms tomorrow. Future timing for tomorrow across the southeast, we'll see some storms actually fire up going to tomorrow morning for those across areas like Alabama and Georgia. Eventually going to tomorrow afternoon, it'll become a mess of storms across the southeast, but our more organized area with that cold front will be back up here in Arkansas. So with the storm activity in Florida and anywhere really in the southeast still being fairly disorganized. Eventually heading into the early morning hours on Thursday, that line will continue to march through Alabama and Mississippi, with damaging winds being the main concern. It'll eventually weaken as it approaches the Gulf Coast. Back down in Florida, we're going to still see some ongoing showers and storms for the daytime Thursday before that cold front does arrive and bring some slightly cooler air to your area. Temperatures on Monday for the northern plains are going to be chilly. We're talking going to next week. Temperatures are currently forecasted to be in the 20s, possibly even lower than that. Again, it could even go lower than that. This is just an initial forecast, but we will definitely see cooler weather without a doubt going into next week. Same thing with this Friday, by the way. This is within the next few days. We're talking temperatures in the 20s and low to mid 30s across a large area in the Midwest. So make sure, again, you're getting your sensitive vegetation inside, covering it over, because we will begin to see more frost over the next several days. And not just that, but the high temperatures for Friday afternoon, not looking to be great. You'll probably need a jacket if you're up in Wisconsin. We're talking about low 40s for high temperatures in those regions. And the Atlantic tropics have been somewhat less active over the last week. However, look at the Gulf of Mexico. There's actually a little system here that is in southwestern portions of the Gulf of Mexico that has a 60% chance of development here within the next few days. And this is a look currently in the southwest Gulf of Mexico at this big area of convection. This is really the remnants basically from Julia, which is the one that made landfall back down in areas near Costa Rica only a few days ago. So we're looking at some of the remnants from that. There's a lot of convection with this system. Now, where's this going? Because obviously it's in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. We don't want to see this come towards the United States. Well, there is some good news. It has actually been moving very slowly off to the north, but over the next few days, it's likely going to stay very stationary and eventually take a little U-turn back down to the south. So good news there, but obviously this is a pretty close call because it's not very far away from the United States, but we can thank the cold front back up to the north. It should be able to let this go a bit further to the south along with a high pressure system. So some good news there. Make sure to like button down below, subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.